Well, here's a hot one. Welcome back to Hardball. Should 6 former Bush administration officials be investigated and possibly charged for allegedly giving legal cover to torture at Guantanamo Bay? That's a decision expected this week by prosecutors in Spain. Among the 6 officials are former Attorney General Alberto Gonzales, former Undersecretary of Defense Douglas Feith, and former Vice President Dick Cheney's Chief of Staff David Addington. What is the implication of this investigation for each of those individuals? And should the U.S. surrender its autonomy to this extent and be subjected to this kind of law? David Corn is chief of the Washington Bureau for Mother Jones. And Frank Gaffney is president of the Center for Security Policy and a former Assistant Secretary of Defense. Frank, you first. I don't know the law on this. I know that the case they have, the standing is that these were residents of Spain or citizens of Spain, and they're basically defending them by prosecuting our officials potentially. What's your sense of the legal standing they might be standing on here? The Spanish.
Yeah, look, the word you didn't use, Chris, but that I think is really paramount importance here is sovereignty. The idea that the United States is going to have administration officials, people who didn't actually, according to anybody, actually engage in torture or authorize the use of torture. If any torture took place at all, it certainly wasn't as a result of their direct actions. And yet you've got the government of Spain, or at least a judge in Spain, beginning the process of prosecuting people for the advice they gave the President of the United States in the course of their official duties. I think this is an affront to our sovereignty. I think it would be, frankly, a nightmare for the Obama administration, and for that matter, any administration of this country, were we to accede to it. And I hope that Spaniards will get an awful lot of pushback from the United States government, today's government, not just the previous one, overreaching and violating our sovereignty.
Frank, suppose on that line that we had citizens tortured by some other country. Wouldn't we want to go after their officials who possibly ordered those tortures? Wouldn't we want to do it?
Again, Chris, we're talking about the United States of America. We're talking about a process which is in place
part of the world.
To prosecute people. Well, here's the point, and I'm so glad you brought that up. You've got an awful lot of people who think we're part of the world, and therefore the world's policies or prescriptions or judgments or jurisprudence.
I'm just talking.
I think that's a terrible mistake.
I'm just talking mutual respect for the law. That's all I'm saying.
I thought you were going exactly where this is headed.
Chris.
No, I'm not going anywhere. I'm asking if you think that the justification for not being prosecuted is that it's our nationals against their nationals. It could just as easily be their nationals against our nationals against their nationals. And then you say, well, that doesn't count.
No, I think this is an infringement on our sovereignty. We should reject it, period.
Well, then the Spanish should reject what we say. Go ahead. Go ahead,
It's
David.
not just a sovereignty issue. We have signed international agreements that govern our own behavior. We've signed them voluntarily. We are not just, the United States does not stand just on its own in the world. It is governed in its actions by its own assent by international laws such as the Geneva Conventions. In this case, what you have is the Spanish government investigating. They haven't indicted anyone yet. Whether Bush administration officials, not that they conducted torture themselves, but that they wrote legal opinions that they knew were not well-founded in order to give the cloak of legality to criminal behavior. That's the charge. Now, whether that ends up being proven in a Spanish court or any other court remains to be seen. And that's what the Spanish prosecutors are indeed examining. And Chris, I think you have a good point. If a foreign government had acted in this way about American citizens, we'd want to see something done about that. And Spain, they went after Augusto Pinochet, the Chilean dictator, and they got an international warrant against him, and they had him arrested in London, and only because Jack Straw, the British, I think he was foreign minister or minister of the interior at the time, decided that he was too feeble and of ill health to be extradited back to Spain. That's the only reason why he didn't go. So this is a model that has been recognized by other governments around the world in extreme cases of genocide and torture and war crimes.
Yeah, you've just heard very well elucidated the position of people like Harold Koh, the man that the President Obama intends to put in, if he's able to, as the State Department's senior legal advisor. It will be very interesting to see whether Mr. Coe, who has been one of the great champions of transnational jurisprudence, of having these international courts and jurists and confabs tell us how our laws ought to be interpreted or mutated, how
Frank,
he will behave when he gets into that job, if he does. I think that's a real problem for the Obama administration.
Frank, should we not have had the Nuremberg trials because they were an international tribunal? I mean, I take it that your position is that the U.S. shouldn't sign any treaties that might ever restrict U.S. actions or that might ever lead to the U.S. being held accountable for any of its actions.
No, you're putting words in my mouth, David, and they're not terribly elegantly phrased.
That seems to be the implication of what you're saying.
Okay, let's...
the Nuremberg trials
what is the state of play here? I just want to know.
Prosecuting American officials in the course of their duties, doing their job, advising the President of the United States in a system of laws.
Just doing my job.
Have nothing to do.
Okay, I want it.
Inside
gentlemen,
a system
I want to disentangle
under
this.
our Constitution. That's, David, where you and I disagree. I believe the Constitution of the United States is supreme. Where we enter into treaties consistent with it, fine. But if they are inconsistent with it, the Constitution should prevail. Absolutely.
The Senate gets to decide that when it ratifies treaties.
It does.
And it has ratified a host of treaties over the years that you don't want us to abide by.
And in some cases, that's been a mistake. In other cases, they've imposed self-executing and non-self-executing provisions on it. This is a very complicated business. I just think that the principle of our sovereignty ought to be supreme.
Okay, let me ask you about the principle that you have, Frank Gaffney, and I respect it. I think I might agree with you on this one, by the way. What about Milosevic?
I'm rethinking my position, Chris.
I know. What about Milosevic? What about the former president of Chile? And what about these cases where we do have international fugitives and where we do have international justice? Are you saying that American exceptionalism is paramount? We are unique in this world. Nobody messes with our people. Is that your principle? We are unique.
Look, Chris, you and I, when we were in government...
I mean, in other words, we are entitled to a different approach than the rest of the world. Are you saying... I mean, it's fine if that's your position.
Well,
it may be mine, too.
Let me tell you what my position is. You and I in government, and everybody else takes an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States, where you have people who are saying, you know, we're going to actually change the Constitution of the United States, not through the process that is provided for by the Constitution, by the way, but by having some international jurist or some international convention or some international treaty that we haven't necessarily subscribed to imposed on us by judges. In fact, Harold Coe makes an interesting point. He says that today there are 4 and sometimes 5 members of the Supreme Court of the United States who took that oath, by the way, Chris, but who nonetheless feel that we need to internalize international law in ways that are not prescribed by our Constitution and our laws. That's wrong. That's an infringement on our sovereignty.
No, it's not, Frank.
Absolutely.
No, it's not. Supreme Court justices look to society around us, and they look for cues, and if they want to see it in transnational law, they can apply that if they find a reason to apply it.
Yeah, it just doesn't happen to be our Constitution,
It's not about giving up sovereignty.
Aside from that, Mrs. Lincoln, how'd you like the play? That's a kind of small problem. The Constitution is supposed to be the supreme law of the land and to describe all of the laws that flow from it.
Okay, let me tell you my view, Frank, buddy. I'll tell you my view of this. We've crossed that line in that West Point speech by President Bush, George W. Bush, up there in 2002, when he said we're going to go into other countries and we're going to kick ass because they don't have democracy in those countries. That's when he said we're going to go kill people internationally because we don't like their form of government. That's when we crossed the line, okay,
Boy,
Frank? That's when we broke the international deals.
We shouldn't be
statement
at West Point. I'm sure he didn't say any of that, Chris. I'm absolutely sure he didn't say it. That's kind of red meat for MSNBC, baby, but he didn't say that. What the president said is where we have people who are threatening the security of the United States, we are going to defend ourselves. We're not going to wait, as Harold Coe wants us to, until we get some permission slip.
We're going to go fight for democracy in the world and kill people who get in our way.
He wasn't going to do that.
That's what he said.
He was absolutely right in saying so.
That's the problem. Yeah, he was going to do mass killing.
He was not going to do mass killing. If we wanted to do mass killing, we could have done mass killing, my friend.
You know, Frank, you're a great side of the Constitution when it's on your side.
I'm a believer in the Constitution.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen.
Let me finish.
David
John Yoo and others wrote memos saying that the president was actually above the Constitution, that he was in essence king when it came to what he wanted to do at time of war.
Thank you, David Corn.
Go to the facts.
We wish you had an hour for this. David Corn, Frank Gaffney, thank you. We'll be right back.